in mind with the bracha, all of you. I hope you have the bracha in mind. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kirishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Varevna Adonai Eloheinu et divrei Torah b'finu b'fimcha beit Yisrael, v'niyeh anachnu v'tze'etzenu v'tze'etzeimcha beit Yisrael, kulanu yodea shemecha v'lomdei toratecha lishma, Baruch atah Adonai lomei Torah le'amo Yisrael. Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher b'chabad mikol amim v'natan lanu torato, Baruch atah Adonai noten Torah.
Amen.
All right, so what we're going to do, amen, is we're going to get started to the point where we were yesterday. And we were dealing with 7b1, 7b2, and 7b3. Now, one or two of my fellow learners had a couple of issues where they weren't that clear. And, I've been chatting to them just to get a little bit more clarity, because what we're dealing with here is extremely difficult. And I'm just going to give a couple of sentences of review, because I think if we do that, it lets us set the good tone for where we were before we get to 7b4. Okay. So the one focus I want to let everybody know is it's nothing in the Gemara happens in a vacuum. What do I mean nothing happens in a vacuum? We've got to think of this as a halachic think tank, meaning what happens is there would be situations that would arise, and when those situations would arise, you would have to think of legal remedies to deal with that particular situation. Guys, it's saying my internet connection is unstable. Can you see and hear me?
Loud and clear.
Yes,
okay.
loud and clear.
Loud and clear.
I think it's you that's unstable, not the connection, Dave.
I've always been unstable. And, they say that you can always tell somebody's mental stability by the friends they choose.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Much appreciated.
Pleasure.
And so true. So, well said.
Thanks. So what happens is that there's biblical enactments, and then what happens is people behave badly, and then sometimes your initial biblical enactments don't always work sufficiently in times where people don't behave by the rules. Then you have to have more stringent rules. But if the rules become too stringent, then you've got anarchy, because nobody's going to adhere to them. So again, it's a bit of a balance between situational remedies compared to time-old classical moral principles. And that's what the Gemara is constantly dealing with. And it's a think tank where it deals with every single sort of halachic problem that you're going to have in a particular situation. It is a very, very frustrating exercise. As amazing as it is spiritually, it's an intellectually and frustrating exercise and emotionally draining. Because what's happening is just when you're totally sure of one position, then you're getting a completely conflicting opinion. Then you're not sure of the previous position. And if you, like me and most other people that never grew up with it, you don't remember the previous position. I don't know if any of you can concur with what I'm saying.
Totally.
Yeah. So the thing of it is that while we're doing a summary every day, is we're putting in about 40 minutes worth of work into 3 or 4 lines just to solidify so that we can go on to the next step. So I want to solidify what we're talking about here. The essence and the point of this, by one of my discussions with one of my friends today and yesterday, let me know that sometimes we read it and we get bogged down by the detail, or we've misread, or we've missed the point. And it's happened to me where I've misread or I've missed the point often. So it's not about what the jersey is worth during the winter season in terms of fulfilling its functionality, and that's the real price. And the fact of it is, on the summer sale, the jersey, that's not the true reflection of price. What you've got to say is, why is this analogy with the land of Nisan and Tishrei brought to the fore? It's not in order to discuss land prices and seasonal fluctuations and land values for repayment. It's about one principle, is to ensure that the damaged party, in this particular case, because we're talking about the book of Bava Kamma of damages, we are talking about, and it brings in lenders, etc., but primarily we're talking about damages. So what we're trying to say here is, what is the point of this? What's the point of the season? And you can't lose the bigger picture, because the problem is when it goes into a minutiae of detail of everything, we miss the big picture. The big picture is a damager damaged the ox of his fellow, or a damager damaged the field of his fellow, or his property, or his person, etc. Now, he doesn't want to pay back the money immediately if the damage was caused in a bad season. Why? Because if he's paying back with land, what does this mean? He has to pay back more land to cover the damage, because the land is worth less now than it will be in 6 months. So what it's going to come to say is that the damager is going to want to delay the injured party by a couple of months, maybe up to 6 months, and say, listen, you'll get your 100 zuz, don't worry, for the damage I caused you, or the 80 zuz, or whatever that damage is, but I don't have the money at the moment, and I can't sell it at the worst market-related prices because I'm just going to be losing here. So you need to just be patient and wait. And what the Torah is saying is that why should the damaged party be patient? He was damaged. If the other guy fulfilled his responsibility and his watchfulness, the damage would never have occurred. So therefore, if he happens to damage the other person where the market prices for property was high, he lands up in a fortunate position in that he hasn't, his timing has been good. But if he happened to damage in an unfortunate season where the land was lying fallow and he didn't have the cash equivalent to give, and just bear in mind here that he could give the cash equivalent. Does that make sense? But if he didn't have the cash to give, then he can't expect the damaged party to wait 6 months when he damaged now, because this was in essence his fault. And the damaged party is also inconvenienced. Why is he inconvenienced? Because now he's got to play the estate agent role and sell the property. So that's what it's about, is to make sure the person can recover the money quickly. And one of the issues that's brought up is that when the damaged party starts to get a little bit, I wouldn't say cute, but he says, listen, I don't exactly want what is my biblical right. I want slightly other land. If it's average land instead of superior, I'd like to take a little bit more. And if it's inferior land, I'd like to take a lot more. And this is what I'm thinking. Then there's to a certain degree, we want to see if he's allowed to do it, and if the person that's suffering that loss by having to pay when his animal damaged the other one at an off season, he's going to get very upset if the other person basically makes a profit by getting more land during Tishrei and then having the convenience to sell it during Nisan. Because what was the whole point of this? That he was given superior land. Why? Because buyers jump at the opportunity to buy superior quality land, and therefore he can recover his money quickly. That's why it says the choice is land, in order to be able to recover his loss. So if he's buying less than superior land and he's sitting on it for months, the person that's made financial restitution is going to resent him, because he's saying, like, I understand I've damaged you, but you were sitting on this. You never converted it to cash urgently. And therefore, I had to be suffer the financial loss. So we're balancing, as we said yesterday, the relationships with neighbors, as well as what is fair to both damager and damaged. Okay. And on this, we're going to just do the review yesterday quickly. And the review yesterday was as follows. Is that the first person you had, just give me 1 second, guys. Just moving my camera out the way. As we talk about a case of Ulla, the son of Rav Ilayi, okay? And he wants to say that he's bringing a contradiction. This whole discussion occurred because there was a contradiction. What was that contradiction? In the term pit, he said he shall return money. Do you remember that? He shall return money. And then with regards to Shane and Regal, it says he must pay with his choicest field or choicest vineyard. So how did this start? It said there's a contradiction between does he pay with his choicest field or vineyard, or does he pay with money? Why does there seem to be a contradiction? And does it occur that he just pays with money with regards to pit? And then we said there was a Gezerah Shava linking all the avos together, stating that you have to pay with your choice of field, or you can pay with money. Again, why are you paying with your choice of field? Is because if it's superior field, then the person can recover their loss by converting it into cash quickly. If the person has cash, then they save the damaged party from having to sell that sort of property, and they can recover quickly. And the person that's the damaged doesn't have to find land at the off season and pay more money than he has to. Okay, so that's how that was reconciled together. Now, according to Ulla, the son of Rav Ilayi, what he's saying is that you have to pay with land in a case where you're getting very cute with the damaged party, where you making sure that the damaged party will have to force you to go to court, go through a trial, etc. You're not coming to him and saying, listen, we did wrong, we damaged your property, it was accidental, here's the money. In that case, he can pay with money, he can even pay with bran, as we saw, or any sort of item that he can convert to cash. And the Torah is very lenient with him. Does that make sense? If all of a sudden the damaged party, he drags through a court trial, wastes the court's time, wastes the damaged party's time, the court is less likely to be kind. And in that case, he has to pay from his choices field or choices vineyard. And it could be that he pays a lot more money. Why? He then has to sell it at the point where he might be getting a depressed value for his property and has to sell more property in order to collect that sort of debt. Okay. So according to Rav Ulla, that is that particular verse, and he uses the term he shall pay to indicate that when we were discussing the law of the thief in Shemot chapter 22 verse 3, it said the law of the thief who pays double. What does he mean he pays double? Compensation is you pay back what you stole. So if you stole 50 rand, you pay back the 50, and the penalty is another 50. So you're paying in total 100 for a 50 loss. You're only paying the 100, or you're only paying the double. The penalty amount is the duplicate of the compensation. You're paying that if you are dragged to court and then they convict you. But if it uses the term he shall return the money, it says in the case of a robber that if he shall return the article that he stole, then he's okay because it's voluntary. He doesn't have to go through this double payment penalty. Okay. Now, why do we get the word he shall pay? Because initially, when we're talking about property, he shall pay his choices field. So he shall pay is indicating that the court at this point has forced him. And when it says shall return money in the case of the pit, he shall return is the same phrase that's used for the double penalty of the thief, meaning the compensation plus the penalty amount. So that's Rav Ulla's statement. And he said, listen, one is where you're forced to pay against the law, and one is where it's voluntary. And Abaya doesn't like this because he says the term shall be paid would imply that the damager is forced to pay against his will. So then Abaya proposes something different. What does he propose? He talks about his master rabbi, who's both his uncle and mentor, and employs a way to resolve the difficulty. So he says, what are we talking about here? Then he starts to discuss talks about the seasonal fluctuation. And it wasn't only the seasonal fluctuation that he mentioned when he was talking about Maisa Ani on the 3rd and the 6th year. He was talking about Maisa Ani that if anybody needs funding because their property goes to less than 200 zuz, they're entitled to collect up to 1,000 zuz in one payment. But he's saying, what happens if a person's property in Nissan, which is the true value of their property, is worth 200 zuz, but they are desperate for cash flow. They have got a property, but they're desperate for cash flow. And in the case where they're desperate, they need to sell it now in Tishrei at a discounted price urgently, which could be up to half the value lost because they really need the cash. So what the fund does, the Masa Ani fund, to give him the money, is they say, listen, we'll do a compromise. The money that you would have got in Nissan for your property compared to the money that you would get now, we will loan you that money as bridging finance so that you can sell your property at the correct market-related price. And the reason why we give him up to half is because the custom was that the property price generally didn't dip by more than half. Okay, it wouldn't only be half. Maybe it was only 30 zuz short. So that's what the issue is. So why does a buyer bring the case of his master Rabba? Just for two reasons. He's not just talking about the price of seasonal fluctuations, because that could have just been discussed generally with an agrarian sort of economic culture. What he's talking about here is, how do you determine land value? Do you determine it at today's prices, or do you determine it at future prices? And the case of it is, it's not whether you determine it at today's prices or future price. It's determined at what the true value of an article is. So the future price, whatever the true value of the article is, whether it's 6 months in the future in Nissan, if you're in Tishrei, or if you're currently in Nissan, whatever the value is, that's what it's worth. Meaning, we take the example of a jersey, that a jersey is meant to keep people warm, so that if a jersey is sold in winter, because it fulfills its function of keeping somebody warm, that's the true value of a jersey. What it is sold for in summer at a half sale special, when in fact the climate is sweltering hot, that's not the value of the jersey. That's the sale price. So that's what he's talking about. And how does he relate this? He relates this in a very, very simple way. And I'm going to conclude with this and then bring the two Rav Achas. So what does he say? Very simple. He says that if you, let me just word it like this. He shall pay his choices meaning that a damager is entitled to superior land. So if the damaged party takes the superior land, as is his right, then he is paid from the choices. But if it turns around that he says, listen, let me rather have more land, but average land, then according to a buyer, the damager is entitled to turn around to say, listen, if you're going to take average quality land, you need to take it at the higher price of Nissa. So when it uses the term he shall return, he's not coming to talk about he shall return a lost article, because that's Rav Illa. He's saying he shall return to the price in Nissan, in other words, the full market price. So he shall pay. The choices means when the damaged party accepts the superior land, as is his biblical right, the damager shall pay of his choicest land. And when the damaged party is requesting average land, he has to then pay at the Nissan price, and he shall return to the true value price. That will prevail in the expensive season. Now, before we go on to the two Rav Achas, does everybody understand me up until this point?
Yeah, that's good.
Yes,
Dan.
that's good, Dan.
Yeah. Nice summary. Perfect. Excellent. Well done. Thank you.
Fine. Now we're going to go through the two issues of the Rav Acha Bar Yaakov. There's Rav Acha Bar Yaakov and Rav Acha, the son of Icha. Okay. So the first thing that happens is Rav Acha Bar Yaakov challenges the explanation of a buyer. Why does he challenge the explanation of a buyer? Okay. Because he says, listen, I don't understand what you've done here. You have weakened the power of damaged parties in respect to collection of average and inferior land. For the merciful one stated in the Torah that a damaged party can collect even from superior land. So the reason that it uses the term even means to imply, if I say, guys, listen, you can borrow my 3 cars, you can even borrow the Porsche. Now, if I turn around, and I'll say to you, guys, you can even borrow the Porsche. You can borrow my cars, you can even borrow the Porsche. When I say the word even borrowing the Porsche, it means that obviously then you can borrow the other cars. Because even is a kal v'chomer. It means even more so. So if I say you can even borrow the top range car, it means obviously you can borrow the average or inferior cars. Am I right? With the term even. It's a kal v'chomer. So he's saying the very fact that the Torah, the merciful one stated in the Torah that a damaged party can even collect from superior land, obviously implicit in that statement means that he can collect from average and inferior land. So why should the damaged party be handicapped in this manner? Because he said he's not prevented to. Yes, he's got a right to superior land, but that right to superior land is only so the damaged party can convert it to cash quickly, because it's more sought after. If he wants average or inferior quality land, that's cool. And he's saying another thing. He's saying that, listen, say the damaged party damaged your ox to 80 zuz, right? He's only ever, whether he's paying superior land, paying you that 80 zuz worth of land anyway. He's not selling you his entire superior land. He's selling you a tract of land equivalent to 80 zuz. So if he gives you average land to the value of 80 zuz, where it's a bit more land, or you want inferior land, and it's 80 zuz worth, and it's a little bit more than average, and quite a bit more than superior, you're only being paid 80 zuz back. You don't lose. The damaged party is not the damager is not losing. Do you see his argument? It makes sense to me.
Yeah, it's clear. Thank you.
It's clear. Guys, it's clear. He's just solid, saying, like, what's the issue?
Solid argument, actually. Yeah.
Fine. So to me, it makes sense. And then they both agree on one thing. Abaya and Rav Acha agree on one thing, that firstly, there is a biblical right to accept from superior land. So number one, if the damager doesn't want to sell average or inferior land, the damaged party has to accept that. But if he's prepared to sell average or inferior land, the only thing of it is he can't ask for a higher valuation. He must take it at whatever it's valued at the time he did damage. You get what I'm saying? That the damager can't tell the damaged party, if you want inferior average land, you need to take it at the higher Nissan price. In other words, if he's agreed to sell them average or inferior land, he has to give it to them at the same principal value as superior land, because he's not losing. There's not a double rule book that applies. But if he doesn't want to sell average or inferior land for whatever reason, he doesn't have to. Because biblically, he only has to supply superior land. He just can't take advantage by telling the damaged party, you have to take it now at the Nissan rate. Because the entire law was held in order to give the damaged party a way to recover his money quickly. Okay. And also, Rav Acha bar Yaakov, according to the view of Rashi and the Rosh, according to the Rosh, that if a damager doesn't want to pay with a particular tract of land, say it was sentimental because his kids grew up, and he's got another piece of land that fulfills that legal requirement, he may do so. But providing it is superior land. He can't turn around and say, well, that superior land is sentimental to me, you can take average land. He has to pay from his biblical right. As he can't withhold that from the damaged party. Guys, this is pretty clear. Has anybody got any questions so far?
No, clear to me. I'm
very
fine.
clear.
Michael?
Yeah, much clearer.
Okay. So the one thing that you've got to bear in mind is Abaya did have a valid point, just before we agree with Rav Acha bar Yaakov. And Abaya's point is that he's basically worried that neighbors are not going to get along. Because if, for example, the person buys average or inferior land, they're not going to sell it immediately, always quickly. Do you get what I'm saying? So then the damager is going to feel irked that he had to pay at an immediate Tishrei price, lost money, and he was okay with it to the point where the guy turned over the money quickly and recovered his loss. He said, okay, fine, the guy needs the money back. He needs to recover his money. I take the hit. I should have watched, and he has to go to the trouble of being the estate agent. Fine. But if he sees that his next door neighbor has sat on the land for 6 months and then sold it at the higher price, he's going to get irked. Do you get what I'm saying? He actually is going to get irked. So Rabbi had that as probably a concern. So he said, according to Abai, he said, listen, if you want to take average or inferior land, then you need to take it at a higher price. So I think what he might have been trying to do, and I can't predict a buyer, nor can I read his mind, is he wanted to probably resolve the conflict of somebody buying non-sellable, easily sellable land, so that the person wouldn't then take it at the cheaper price and make a profit on that damaged land, waiting 6 months, because that would really upset the other party. Guys, do you agree with my thoughts, perhaps, or not? If you disagree, I'm listening.
I think, no, I agree 100%, but I think it should possibly apply only to a neighbor. But to somebody who's far away, then the other one makes more sense. But to a neighbor,
Gab, no one was far away. This was the point, for one reason, is that look at the case of Shane and Regel. A case of Shane and Regel is when an ox damages in your property or eats in your property.
Yeah,
it's
that's
not
right.
To go from Glen Hazel to Four Ways.
No, you're right. It's always going to be close. It's always going to be
always.
Close. Yeah.
And even oxes, they're going to live near each other because they're going to damage each other in a close proximity. And the population was less then.
Yeah. Listen, these guys have both got good points. The one to keep it at the... I understand both sides. They're both quite strong.
Yeah. So they are both strong. And you know what? It just shows how much you've grown, because the first thing when we started Gomorrah used to do is turn around and say, yeah, I agree with Rav. And this one. And now what you're trying to do, and this is a point where you're really intellectually growing and emotionally growing, is you're saying, let me see different points of view, because there's a genius and a beauty in both points of view. And what we're trying to do here is look at it from every side, because this is a legal think tank, to come up with a route to the solution. So we've got 10 more minutes, guys. I just want to go through something quickly. Rav Acha Bar Yaakov was now talking about a situation not of damages, of lenders, okay? And he was saying if there's a situation to which Rabba's distinction can be compared, it can be compared to a case of a lender collecting a debt during Tishrei. For a lender's right is to collect from average land, but if he says to the debtor, instead of giving me a small amount of average land, give me a slight amount of inferior land, the debtor can imply to him, if you take average land as is your right, take it per current depressed price, but if you do not wish to take average land, instead ask for inferior land, you must take it at the higher per future price. Indeed, Rabba's distinction has application. So let me just bring to you what he's talking about here. In this particular case, he's saying one particular thing. He's saying that the person says to the poor person, listen, I need my money back, but instead of giving me average land back, as is my right, I'd rather to take more inferior land. The poor person can turn around and say, listen, if you're going to take inferior land, you need to pay at the Nissan price. And he sees that it has application because he said, again, this person is poor. You've lent him money to start with because he has a very difficult financial situation. And now what you're trying to do is get him to give you more land out of season. And then instead of waiting a couple of months, and then if you're doing it, you're going to land him in a difficult financial situation. The whole reason you helped him to start with is because he was in a difficult situation. So, if you're going to take something different to what the Bible or the Torah asked you to take back in terms of land, you need to give him a slightly higher price, because if you're extracting the money now instead of waiting from Nissan for a couple of months, you actually put him back into a difficult financial position. Do you see that, guys? So now he's not talking about the damager and the damaged. He's talking about a borrower and a lender. And he said that the previous case of asking for it at the correct Nissan price for a lender has a little bit of merit according to Rabba's distinction, because he's saying that the person borrowed from you in the first place because they're poor, and now if you're going to take it at the Tishrei price, they need more land to pay you back, and if they waited a couple of months, they would need less land to pay you back, so they're in a difficult financial position. So in that case, it has distinction because you should pay at the future high price, because the guy's going to go back to a bad financial position. So now he's not talking about a damaged and a damage. He's talking about a lender, because the lender is automatically in a much more poor financial position, because that's why he borrowed money. It's not like a case that was damaged. You know his financial position. Right. Does that make sense before we go on to the last point? We've got 6 minutes.
Good.
Yeah, I just want to ask you something, just very quickly. With superior land, it says you can take sort of, I can't remember the exact English, it says you can take up to superior land. Does it say with the creditor that you can take up to medium? I just wanted to know if it's the same wording.
All right, let me just finish my points. We'll come back to that because it's going to distract. Please. Sorry, but we've got 6 minutes. So
we can cover it tomorrow.
So what I was going to say is as follows, is that Rav Acha, the son of Rav Ikka, challenged Rav Acha by Yaakov's opinion here, because he's saying, hang on a second, we know that we don't want to impoverish a poor person or a borrower. And I agree with you, we're both on the same page here. But if you turn around and you force the lender to pay you back a premium price, if he takes inferior quality land, the lender is going to be very upset, because he's going to turn around and say, if I would have still had the money that I lent you and never lent you the money in the first place, I would be able to have the cash flow to buy land at the current lower price, inferior land at the current price. Now that you have my money and my money is in your possession, you tell me I must take the inferior land at the future higher price. And in fact, what you're doing is, I've lent you the money and no interest rate. You're punishing me. You've taken my cash flow, and now you want every other citizen can buy land at this attractive lower price. And what you've done is now you're telling me I must pay it at the prime price. So basically what he's saying is the biggest issue now is that the whole point is to allow borrowers to get money from lenders. And you would have slammed the door in the face of the borrower by making sure that a person doesn't want to lend them money, because now they're being held to ransom by the person they lent money to by saying you have to pay it at the highest price. Remember, in the Bible, traditionally in the Torah, it turned around and said that borrowers can pay back with inferior land. That was biblically. But the rabbis upgraded it to average land because inferior land was very difficult to buy. Very difficult to sell. And people wouldn't be lending poor people money. But if the poor people, when I say poor, I mean not making expenses, also had average quality land and they could pay back average, it's a much easier land to sell. So the person that lent them the money, the creditor could recover the debt by selling the borrower's payback property much quicker. So what the Torah said is, if the borrower pays back to the lender average quality land, they will get loans more easily because it's easier to sell average quality land than inferior. And right. they were enhanced in that case because the whole point here is to help prospective borrowers. And the two Rav Achas are busy arguing and saying, listen, we need to get on the same page here, because our goal is to make sure that borrowers do not land up in a worse financial position by having to give more land at an inappropriate time where the land value is lower. So they're ending up, if they waited a couple of months, getting more. Nor do they want the lenders to have resentment and not lend their money. So this is the point of contention that they have. Any questions?
Great, Dan. Thank you.
No, I think this is even a stronger case than damage, because you don't want to...
it's a different case. It's a different case entirely.
No, but it's even stronger. It's even stronger because you don't want to deter creditors from lending money. Whereby with that, it's even stronger Correct. Motivation to give it to them at the current rate.
Correct.
So yeah, that's it.
So yeah. Both the Rav Achas agree that they actually want people to get loans. And the first Rav Acha by Yaakov is just saying, listen, you can't make somebody... it's not unreasonable to ask for the higher valuation of land, because if he sells in Tishrei, the poor person is losing money. If he waited a few months, he could repay the debt with less land. And then Rav Acha, the son of Rav Ikka, just turned around and said, yes, but if you start getting cute with the person that lent you money and saying you have to take it at the higher land price, at the end of the day, the guy's going to say, you know what, if I had my cash and never lent it to you in the first place, I would have the money to buy it at the attractive price. Now you're holding me to ransom on the money I helped you with at no interest. So they're actually on the same page. They're working out a way to make sure borrowers can get money. And so does the Torah also. The rabbi said, listen, they can collect from average land. So the person lending the money can get paid back in land and sell that land quickly so that they're not deterred from lending to borrowers. So everybody's on the same page. They've just got different angles of how they're trying to resolve it. Okay.
Very good.
Yeah, very clear. Very clear. Thank you, Damon.